Welcome back to another episode of the Prepared School Psych podcast. For today's episode, I wanted to share a video I recorded for the Prepared School Psych Community. Each month during this 2024-25 school year, I am reading a different book and sharing my takeaways from that book with all of the members. In this video, I am sharing my takeaways from the book Soundtracks: The Surprising Solution to Overthinking by Jon Acuff, one of my favorite authors. I wanted to share this replay with the podcast listeners because I read this book after doing the podcast episode on imposter syndrome. I found the book to have some great practical strategies for those with imposter syndrome. Enjoy this replay, and if you are interested in hearing about other books I have created takeaway videos for, feel free to use our 2-week free trial of the Prepared School Psych Community. Just go to my website, jennyponzuric.com/podcast, and use the code podcast for your 2-week free trial. And all of the resources I mentioned during this video can also be found in the show notes. I hope you enjoy. All right, this month, we are talking about this amazing book, Soundtracks: The Surprising Solution to Overthinking by Jon Acuff. Let's get into it. All right, first up, I always like to share with you why. Why did I choose this book? For those of you who have listened to some of my other book club kind of takeaway videos, you know that most of these books have been books that I have purchased and they're on my shelf and I just haven't read them yet. This was definitely one of them. And one of the reasons why it was on my shelf is I love this author. This is probably the third, maybe the fourth book I have read by him. And one of the things that I really enjoy about his books, they're so just easy to read. They're fun to read. He has very practical strategies in his books, which I really appreciate. And most importantly, why am I talking about this book for all of us inside this community? I can't be the only person who overthinks. I mean, honestly, just looking at the title of it, I'm like, this book is for me. I tend to overthink from time to time. So what does he mean by the term soundtracks? He is talking about the thoughts that are just constantly running through our heads, like the soundtrack of a movie. What are all of those things that are just playing in the background constantly? So when I was thinking about this as it relates to our fabulous field of school psychology, I started thinking about what are the thoughts that are running through my head when I'm, going to work in the morning? What are the thoughts that are going through my head when I'm leaving the office at the end of the day? What about before I walk into a meeting? Whether it's an IEP meeting, a student study team meeting, whatever you call all of your meetings, what are those, soundtracks that are playing in your head? What are the things that are playing inside your head on a Sunday evening? So I just want us to take a quick moment and really think about whether it's these situations or other ones that you can be thoughtful about right now. What are some of those soundtracks that are playing in your head? For example, I think back when I was early career school psychologist. Talk about Sunday evening. I had 3 schools that I was assigned to early on in my career. And my Monday school always had a 7:45 a.m. student study team meeting. For those of you who don't use that term, pre-referral team meeting. And I could never sleep on Sunday night. Never. Because I was just constantly thinking and worrying that they're going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. They're going to bring something up and everyone's going to stare at me and I'm not going to know what I'm doing. They're going to figure out I have no idea what I'm doing as a school psychologist. Like, these were the soundtracks on a Sunday night. No wonder I could never fall asleep or I'd wake up at 3 a.m. worried, because those were all of the thoughts inside my head. Now, I don't have those thoughts inside my head typically anymore, but we have so many interesting thoughts that are playing in our brains constantly on a repeat. And this really made me think a lot about the term imposter syndrome. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to my podcast episode on imposter syndrome, I'm definitely going to link that here as well for all of you. And as I was reviewing this book, I felt a lot about imposter syndrome because imposter syndrome usually, when we think about it, are the thoughts that are playing inside our head that usually are saying things like, oh my gosh, just wait till they figure out you have no idea what you're doing. Now, I want to share a different term that since I did that podcast episode, I was talking with someone else who has their own podcast who talks a lot about imposter syndrome. And we were chit-chatting about it. And she had shared with me a different term for imposter syndrome that I thought was really helpful. And she calls it beginner syndrome. And I don't know about you, just the term for me, like I'm taking a big deep breath. It's like, well, of course I have all these thoughts in my head. Of course I have all these worries because I'm a beginner in this area. And it made me think about the episode that I shared with all of you, the podcast episode that I did on this topic, because I had mentioned most people in the world have imposter syndrome, but that I don't have imposter syndrome today about the things that I had imposter syndrome about 25 years ago. And that makes sense when she was talking about it's a beginner syndrome. We usually have these thoughts when we're beginning something new, when we're going outside our comfort zone. So of course it makes sense that we are going to have these soundtracks playing in our head when we are brand new to the field, brand new to a school district, brand new to a school within a school district, any type of thing. Because it's just a new thing. We're a beginner at that. I know so many school psychologists who have like worked at the preschool level and then all of a sudden they're like, and now I was assigned high school. Of course, you're going to feel that beginner syndrome all over again. That makes sense. So what else did I learn from this amazing book? As I was reading it, it really made me very aware of all of these thoughts that are running through my head because before really being thoughtful about this, I think they're just running back there. And I don't know how often everyone is aware of them. And this is probably not the first time you have heard this question. I have heard it before. But when we are thinking about all of these thoughts that are running in the back of our brain, one of the questions that this author, Jon Acuff, poses is ask yourself if all of these sentences, are they true? Are they helpful? Are they kind? I think those are three really great questions to be thinking about. Do I want to work on these thoughts? Are they true? Are they helpful? Are they kind? Not that you have to say yes or no to all three of them and to change some thinking patterns here. Sometimes just things like, again, going back to thoughts that I had on Sunday evenings. Oh my gosh, they're going to ask me something I don't know. Is that true? Yeah, actually, that is. It's true. They usually are going to this day, 25 years later, people ask me questions I have never heard before. Of course, that is a true statement. Okay. Is that a helpful statement? No, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. They're going to ask me questions I don't know. They're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing. That's not very helpful. It definitely wasn't helpful for my sleep on a Sunday evening. Absolutely not. Now, are they kind? Unfortunately, we tend to say a lot of unkind things to ourselves. So I just want you to be thinking about what are the thoughts that are running through your head. And you can be thinking about as a school psychologist and your role. You can be thinking about our roles in lots of different ways. Just the thoughts inside our head almost at any time of our day. And really, as you were picking up on some of them, I love this question. Are they true? Are they helpful? Are they kind? And then, of course, we got to figure out if they're not true, or if they're not helpful, or if they're not kind, how do we work on them? Because a lot of people, the author was mentioning, a lot of people will want to make the thoughts go away. Now, some of these thoughts may go away in that I'm going to start feeling more comfortable I am just, after a couple of years of being a school psychologist, some of those will like turn down the volume in the back of my head. But some thoughts in our head, they just kind of hang out there. And we have to intentionally figure out how we want to change them. And so these are the 3 R's that he talks about. We want to retire some thoughts. And then we need to replace them. And once we've decided on these new thoughts, we want to repeat them. Retire, replace, repeat. So I started thinking about what is something that I have noticed that I keep saying to myself, because I'm not worried on Sunday nights that people are going to ask me something I don't know the answer to. So this is a recent thought for me. Can't I just have one day in the week that I can work uninterrupted? What do I mean by that? Many of you know that I get to do lots of trainings, and I love doing trainings. And I also do lots of consultation. I'm on Zoom a lot. And one of the thoughts that I've had going through my head is, can I just have one day on my calendar every single week, Monday through Friday, where I don't have to be on Zoom, where I don't have to show up for a training? Can I just have one day? And it's almost like I'm lamenting about this. I'm just like, can't I just have one day? Okay, so let's run through the questions. Is it true? Can I just have one day? Meaning like I don't have a day. Actually, I'm in charge of my own schedule. It's one of the cool things about working for yourself, and it's one of the horrible things about working for yourself, because I'm in charge of my own schedule, and the only person I can blame about my schedule is me. So one thing is, okay, I could change my schedule. If this was really, really important to me, I could. So is it true? Not 100%. Is it helpful? Absolutely not. This is why I think I notice this sentence so much going through my brain, because when I think this, when I ask this, when I'm worried about it, I don't feel like excited by the question. I am like upset with myself, and I'm like, woe is me. It is not a helpful thought at all. At all. And it's not really kind to myself because, again, I am my own boss of my own schedule. So it really isn't a kind situation at all. So again, I want to retire it. Now, retiring it doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of it and it's never going to show up again. No, but once I start really noticing some of my thoughts, when it comes up, I want to immediately respond to that thought of, can I just have one day in the week? Yeah, you can. Remember, you're in charge of your own schedule. It's like we're almost talking back to our own thoughts. And then I've got to replace it. I got to replace it with something else and then just keep repeating that. So I could say, actually, you are in charge of your own schedule. That could be one phrase that I could replace that with, because it's completely true and I do have control. What is another possibility? Don't forget, you actually love what you do, Jenny. I love training. I love trainings. I love being able to be in office hours and all the other fun things that I get to do. I love all those pieces. And when I'm in them, I love it. I absolutely love it. So I could just be like, when I have that thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have like just one day that's uninterrupted? One, yeah, you can just schedule it. Two, don't forget all the things you do Monday through Friday, you actually love. And then I just repeat that. Every time I hear myself saying that, I'm going to repeat something else. So when we are thinking, well, how do I pick those new thoughts? I have this analogy here on the screen of like picking fruit off of a tree. Because if you're picking apples from a tree, or I remember childhood memory, we used to go peach picking. And we used to pick peaches off of trees. If the first one you don't like, just pick a different one. Try one on. See if it works. Repeat it a bunch of times. And then one of the things that can be really helpful is that if we're trying something out, we're finding evidence that it's true to tell our brain. So I had 2 possible replacement thoughts. Number 1, I am in charge of my own schedule. Okay. Find evidence it is true. Honestly, I could completely rearrange a bunch of things on my schedule right now, and I probably could create some of these days. Okay. There'll be some consequences for doing that, but I could go through and actually do that. I could find evidence that that is a true statement. I am in charge of my own schedule. What about evidence for the other statement? I love what I do. I could easily, the moment I have those thoughts, just look at my calendar and be like, don't forget, you actually love that. You love that. You love that. I could also think maybe right now in this season of my life, meaning this is a busy time of the year for me. I do a lot of training at certain times of the year. And I could just say, you're going to have that time soon. For right now, why don't we just really appreciate those couple of hours you have of uninterrupted work? There's lots of different thoughts I could pick off of this tree here. Now, one of the things that this book really focused on is what about creating like a whole new playlist of thoughts? He uses the term anthem, about having like a whole new anthem to be thinking about. Me, like a whole new playlist. What would be some really helpful thoughts to have? And he brought up two examples. Number one, he brought up the person, I don't know how many of you have heard of this guy, Zig Ziglar. I will tell you once again, fond, maybe not childhood, middle adolescent. This probably will not be surprising to you, but things about self-development, personal development did not start with me. They started with my family. And my father brought me to a training that Zig Ziglar was at. He talked all about mindset. He talked a lot. This was like well before all of this became really, really popular, just about what kind of thoughts you want to be thinking about. And so I found it really interesting that this author brought up Zig Ziglar. And he actually, in the book, talked about that Zig had this full list of statements that he would read to himself out loud in the morning and right before he went to bed, and had all these sentences to create like a whole new set of positive thoughts. I know it sounds a little woo-y. I know. But all of us know there's so much research to back this up. And John Acuff also created his own set as well. And I'm going to put a link to both of these. I always just figured, even if you don't own the book, I found it on Google. So if I can find it on Google, I'm just going to send you guys that link too. You'll be able to find those links on Google right near the replay of this video here. So if you want to try on either one of them, feel free to do that. I started reading Zig Ziglar's. I was like at that point in reading the book, and I was like, oh, I know this guy. And I started reading his. And then as I kept reading, I realized that this author also had his own set, his like new anthem he talks about. And when I read those, those resonated with me a lot more. So this is what I'm going to say to all of you right now. I am going to take on the challenge of over the next 30 days, every morning and every evening, or at least 80%. That's like the goal we put for most kids, right, in their IEP. So at least 80% across the next 30 days. In the morning and in the evening, I am going to read his statements out loud. And I just want to see, like, do I notice anything different for myself taking on this challenge? And I will report back to everyone. So all of you Prepared School Psych members, just make sure to come on back. You guys know I always do another check-in after sharing with you all of the takeaways that I had from the book. I usually at the end of the month also do an office hour where I talk about kind of how I've been applying the book. So during that time, that's what I'm going to talk about. I am so excited to see what kind of changes may happen. And I'll be really honest, if any changes did not happen, I will share those as well. Now, I wanted to leave everyone with one last thought. This was something that I read in the book. And again, this really, really spoke to me. And what the author said is that a helpful practical strategy is to choose your attitude for the day. Again, most of us have heard this, but he gave some really great examples. The author does a lot of travel. I do a lot of travel because I get to do a lot of in-person trainings in so many different places. And his first example was about people who travel. He said, if you travel more than twice a year via airplane, guess what? One of your flights are going to be delayed. Of course, the possibility of that increases the more we actually travel. And he said that he decided early on in his travel to just choose how he was going to react when a plane was going to be delayed. And I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be amazing if I just decided right now how to deal with that? It happens to me. I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times I like to fly back at the end of a day. Like I've done a training. I got to the airport. I've got like maybe a 6:30 or 7 p.m. flight. I would definitely say at least 50% of the time, my flight's delayed. And I get really frustrated by it because all I want to do is get home. All I want to do is get home and unpack and get ready for the next day and go to bed. And now I just start counting the hours. And then I start thinking about, okay, so now we're going to land. Ooh, I'm not going to get home at that time. Oh, that's going to mess with my sleep. And I immediately just start setting myself up for this bad mood for something that I have very little control over. And I thought, what if I just made the decision about how I'm going to react? Because it happens to me frequently. Why don't we just have a different attitude about that? Because again, that attitude is not helpful for me. And I started thinking about in my work, in my role as a school psychologist, how many days where I like start off the day and I've got my list of everything I'm going to get done today. These are all my appointments. And then I got my long to-do list. I'm really good. I love to order it. And then a whole bunch of things happen that day. And I don't look at that list again till like 4:30 in the afternoon. That happens. I'm not going to say every day, but it happens a lot. What if I just decided today how I want to react to those situations so that instead of, woe is me, I never get all my stuff done, my life is whatever. What if I just was like, oh, I already know days like that are going to happen. All right. I've already figured out what I'm going to do in those days. I'm going to look through my list and I'm going to figure out, is there anything on this list that absolutely has to happen today? If so, is that going to happen while I'm still here at the office? Or is that something I'm willing to take on when I get home? Like, am I starving? Do I need to go home and eat something? And then everything else, well, we usually figure it out. And we'll figure out another time to do that. So that when that happens the next time, I'm not flustered about it. And I'm not like, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do in these situations? I've already decided this happens frequently enough that I'm going to choose the attitude about how I'm going to react to this. So these are my last parting thoughts. If you like any of this stuff, the book's not that long. Feel free. Put a link right near this video. If you're interested in reading the book, like I mentioned, I think he's a great author, very easy read, and very practical information. If that's not something that you have time for, I just invite you to take a couple of the suggestions and the strategies that I shared with you and try them on. See if any of them kind of resonate with you. See if any of them work for you. Check out the extra resources I'm sharing. And then as always, if you have some follow-up questions, you want to chat about this, all of you inside the Prepared School Psych community can always come to any of my office hours live. You can post a question on the community forum. You can chat with me about this through the Remind app. However you want to just kind of further this conversation. So I hope everyone found this useful, and I will see you next time. That concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych podcast. And I hope today's discussion equipped you not just with knowledge, but also the confidence to take action. Remember, every conversation we have and every resource we share builds a bridge towards a more inclusive and empowering learning landscape for our students. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and resources to support your journey. Share this podcast with colleagues. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, everyone, the information and advice provided in this podcast are for guidance purposes only, and all listeners are required to follow both federal and state law and their own school district guidelines and policies. Thank you.